Hey fam, I want you to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Roland S. Martin. And don't forget to turn on your notifications. I want to now go to Florida, of course. We talk about the issue of voting. When you talk about voting and economics, well, a House committee there on a party line vote approved a measure to require fines and costs to be paid by folks who were formerly incarcerated. It's been called by supporters of Amendment 4 a modern-day poll tax. In fact, I was tweeting earlier, one woman, a white woman, said that she owed $57,000 in fines, and she felt that it was wrong to impose that. Now, remember, Amendment 4 passed by 65% on Election Day in November. I kept telling y'all, I told Desmond Meade this, and I told his wife, Sheena Meade, this. They were the ones who led the coalition to restore the voting rights. I said, do not trust Republicans in Florida because they were not going to be silent with 1.4 million people getting the right to vote. 1.4 million people in one fell swoop in November was the largest, listen to me carefully, y'all, this was the largest influx of new voters since the Voting Rights Act in 1965. So that y'all actually think Republicans in Florida were going to allow 1.4 million white, black, Latino, Asian, Native American folks to be eligible to vote in local elections in 2019 and in 2020? Hell to the no.
No. To the no, to the no.
Governor Ron DeSantis has yet to weigh in as to whether or not he is going to veto this if it passes the legislature. And let me also unpack this, because you heard Reverend Barber talk about gerrymandering. Republicans in control of legislatures. They, many of them after 2010, when a whole lot of us stayed the hell at home, they picked up 16 legislatures, flipped across the state. Republicans ended up having 31 governor's mansions. They began to gerrymander seats, guaranteeing them majorities. They have a supermajority in Florida, meaning they can pass whatever they want. Democrats don't even matter. Now, if 1.4 million people now get the right to vote, and then they register, then they vote, Republicans could very well lose in many of those places. What does that then mean? They can't now gerrymander. Census is in 2020. That's typically when lines are redrawn. But see, folks sitting here acting like, oh, this is no big deal. No, they are going to fight to the end in order to guarantee they have power. Joseph, when I won NABJ's Journalist of the Year in 2013, it was because of our coverage of voter suppression. I keep trying to explain to people that they can't act like, even with these candidates running on the Democratic side, well, it's no big deal. This is nothing. This is Greg mentioned it earlier. Donald Trump has appointed 22% of all appellate federal judges.
And counting, because they recently changed the rules, so they put the judges on an assembly line.
So if you're in Florida and you file a lawsuit in federal court,
you will be heard by a judge,
largely a Republican judge. All this stuff is connected.
It matters. If we're talking about, Reverend Barr was talking about how they will empower themselves and steal the treasury and change it's American apartheid, and it's happening in slow motion, and it's happening right now. That's part of the issue, is that 2010, the dividends for Republicans that they got in 2010, they're still paying off. They're still paying off because they managed to gerrymander, and although there was the great blue wave that happened in 2018, it still ran up against a pretty tough Republican red wall, a wall that was not crushed. And you can imagine what would have happened if gerrymandering was not a thing.
And keep in mind, the Supreme Court may very well issue a ruling on gerrymandering, and they may allow it. And if that happens, every state Republicans control will immediately redraw lines to benefit them.
It will get locked in for a generation, not just 4 years,
or more.
A generation.
4 generations.
Exactly.
That's the issue. Is that when you start appointing these little 39-year-old white girls who have not been haven't even been practicing law for 5 minutes. When you start appointing them to lifetime appointments, what you're saying is that, heifers are going to live, excuse my language, but the heifers are going to live to be 70.
Well, no, what you heard Reverend Barber said, if they're bankrupting us
that's right.
by 2043 when America's the majority of people of color.
That's right.
But to your point, that woman who was 34 years old, appointed to the federal bench, she will be she'll be 59 in 24 years by 2043. So they'll be taking the money but still control the courts. And now, people of color, we have demographics numbers.
And we've seen this before, Roland.
Yes.
We saw it in Atlanta. Let's look at Atlanta. We saw in Atlanta that black folks became the majority in terms of population, were able to elect black people, but did not have the financial means. We saw it in South Africa.
Right.
Black people the majority, but not the control of the financial means. And so basically, when these judges are going to dictate the terms and conditions of financial interactions, which I'm concerned about voting, but I'm an economist, y'all. So I'm also concerned about the ways that home ownership is going to be affected, the ways that bankruptcy is going to be affected, the way that confiscation is going to be affected, and what we have is a dual track.
Well, like you said, it's all interlocking. And what Reverend Barber said, and you're right, y'all. With this fast track, Mitch McConnell is a feckless tool of corporate interests. He's not going to change. And Roland, you got us going tonight on this anniversary of Dr. King's assassination, brother. Dr. King was a prophetic voice. This is evil. We're facing evil in the world. And these
unadulterated evil.
No question. You can't appeal to it. You can't reason with it.
Nope.
There are 2 stolen governorships in the South. Ron DeSantis stole, and 2 stolen Supreme Court. But I'm talking about what you're talking about, voter suppression. Those elections were stolen. Our brother Andrew Gillum, he could have kept fighting. They didn't count all the votes. Stacey Abrams in Georgia, they didn't count all the votes. So what did these white supremacists do? This heartbeat bill in Georgia, this poll tax in Florida, and when it comes to the Supreme Court, because they're going to go to court, what's going to happen? John Roberts is running all this through freedom of association, through the First Amendment. They are rallying the troops for this thing to run until it comes.
Want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. By going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com, you can make this possible.